The Last of Us Part 2 is an intensely emotional experience designed to challenge the player's ideals and preconceived notions of storytelling. It provides an excellent story of hate, loss, grief, redemption, and forgiveness. Consider this your one and only spoiler warning. We're going to be talking about pretty much every aspect of this game, and that includes the ending, as well as a fair few major story beats throughout the game. Again, major spoilers, so if you haven't finished the game, please turn off this video and come back once you have. And I do implore you to actually play this game for yourself, if you are able, and not just watch it from someone else's perspective. Playing the game will allow you to explore your own opinions and thoughts about what happens, rather than viewing it through the moral lens of your favorite Let's Player. Now, with that said, there are several things about this game that I would like to cover in this video. Mainly the story itself and why I believe it has become so divisive in the community. I have my own interpretations, which admittedly have changed since completing the game for the first time. Hearing interviews with the creative director Neil Druckmann, as well as cast members Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, has given me a fresh perspective of some things. Hearing the intentions behind some scenes does shed a new light on the game, or at least it did for me, as I noticed I had interpreted some scenes incorrectly. That being said, some takes in this video will be pretty much from the mouth of the creators, and I will put links in the description to where I got the information from. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is a common argument that I see about why the writing in this game is bad. There are several scenes in the game that some claim are far too out of character to have actually happened, namely Joel's death at the beginning of the game, and Abby's not death at the end. There are other examples as well, but I'm going to focus on these two in particular. Number one, because they are extremely pivotal to the narrative, and number two, because this video can only be so long and we have a lot of ground to cover. I can talk about this franchise all day long, so if I don't limit myself, we could be here for a while. So what I'll do is I'll lay out the criticism and try to explain it best I can, and then provide the defense. First up, going in chronological order, Joel's death. While I definitely don't agree with the manipulative promotional material that shows Joel in parts of the game where he isn't, also yes, I'm aware Marvel did this as well for the past two Avengers movies. I wasn't a fan of it then either. I don't mind that Joel was killed so early. I definitely would have liked him to be in the story more, but I'm not the writer of this game. It's not my choice how this game plays out, and I think that's where most people are getting upset. They don't like that something this drastic, something this permanent, happens so early in the game, so they try to find reasons to hate it. Anyway, I digress. Joel's death was a very powerful and hard-hitting scene. Even putting it like that is a pretty sizable understatement. I avoided the early leaks like the plague, and when I reached that part of the game, I was devastated. I had never been so simultaneously sad and distraught, and seething with white-hot rage at the same time. My hands went numb, and I got tunnel vision in real life. I don't remember much of the scene with Tommy offering Ellie the food, as I was still trying to process what had just happened. I actually had to step away from the game and go downstairs and give my dad a hug because I needed the support. This section broke me. But the argument that I keep seeing is that Joel would never let himself be put in that situation. He's too experienced and hardened by the world he was forced into to be that trusting that quickly, especially with his little brother Tommy, who we know he is protective of, and even more so, Ellie. In the first game, he recognizes an ambush without even having to leave the car. We later learn that he knew what was happening because he has
been on both sides.
We know that Joel is experienced and knows his way around an ambush. So what gives here? In defense, I say, what about Sam and Henry from the first game? They were in a pretty tight spot then, and they ran together for a little while. Joel had no clue who Henry was, but all things considered, they trusted them pretty quickly. Additionally, people that make this argument largely forget this detail of the first game. The whole journey of The Last of Us Part 1 is Joel learning how to love again, how to love others, his new surrogate daughter Ellie, and most importantly, himself. After the events of the first game, he has now secured his new life. He believes he saved Ellie, he has a place in Jackson with his brother, and he feels justified in his efforts. He knows he can start a life here and be happy, be comfortable. All throughout the first game, we see Joel struggling with this. We see him lose his daughter very early, which fundamentally changes him as a person. He can no longer have attachments to people because he knows they will inevitably hurt him, either by wronging him or dying and leaving a hole in his heart. We see this with Tess very soon after. We don't know if she and Joel were ever romantically involved, but regardless of that, we know they both cared deeply for each other. Tess's dying wish is for Joel to take Ellie to the Fireflies. Joel feels morally and emotionally obligated to fulfill that request because of his relationship with Tess. Later, we meet up with Bill, who furthers this thought. He even tells Joel outright.
And in this world, that sort of shit's good for one thing: getting you killed.
We learn that he thinks this way because he himself has lost a partner, and it affected him so deeply that he decided to just go it alone.
Look, let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, I had somebody that I cared about. It was a partner. Somebody I had to look after. So you know what I did? I wisened the fuck up. And I realized it's gotta be just me.
Bill, it ain't like that. It's
Bullshit. It is just like that.
And we see the effect it had on him. He starts to mumble to himself and is obsessive about laying traps all over his town. You see this all over the place in this section of the game. Joel is given many examples throughout the first game as to why getting attached to people is a bad thing, but inevitably, he gets attached to Ellie and does whatever he can to hold on to that attachment. He loves her, and we learn that during the winter chapter, the feeling is mutual. She will do whatever it takes to protect him. Now, with all that being said, back to part 2. After all of the events happen in part 1, he and Ellie are welcomed back into Jackson and they live comfortably, or as comfortably as you can in the apocalypse. They live there for 4 years with no major life-altering problems. If you went from living in a highly over-militarized QZ, then actively fighting for your life for a year protecting this girl, then you were able to settle down and regain some semblance of a normal life that you hadn't seen in God knows how long, you would start to relax more too. He's able to make friends again, take up hobbies, kick back and enjoy himself more. He can finally be a father again. So yes, after living somewhat easier of a life for 4 years, he is able to be more trusting, especially to someone whose life he just saved. He doesn't expect the damsel in distress to blow his knee out with a shotgun. Side note, this is not me saying Abby is any way the damsel in distress. But put yourself in Joel's shoes. If you just saved a girl your daughter's age from a large pack of infected, the last thing you would expect them to do was make an attempt at your life, much less their whole group be hunting you down specifically. He's caught off guard because the last thing any rational person would expect to happen after performing a great act of bravery and selflessness like saving someone's life would be met with immediate murderous intent. And once he gets comfortable and they give up their names, he realizes that he's made a mistake. He can immediately tell the energy in the room changes and he is surrounded at that point, and it's too late. He did the very thing he was taught not to do. He let his guard down. He let himself get too comfortable, and it cost him his life. It's not bad writing. People just don't want a beloved character to die. And I admit, I didn't either. But again, I'm not the writer. It's not my story. I just experience it. Now to the ending. The final climactic fight from the game. The great decision that the two main characters have to make. Who lives and who dies. Inevitably, we see that Ellie lets Abby go with Lev. The criticism here is that Ellie wasn't able to get her revenge and finish what she started. The ending is cheapened by the fact that we did all this work and it led to nothing. We killed everyone else involved except for the person that mattered most. Abby. She gets to go free. And Ellie is left having lost everything with no real victory to take home, which is a valid argument. I was very disappointed with how the game ended initially. From the start of the game, we are conditioned to hate Abby. She brutally murders Joel right in front of us, and we, as Ellie, are restrained. We are forced to watch while we are powerless to help, and her posse is proud to have done it. Manny even spits on his body. Again, seething, white, hot rage. Which was by design. That's how you're meant to feel. Then after that, you play roughly 12 hours of the game actively on a vendetta to kill Abby. Nothing can stand in your way. You're on a mission. You have to do this. The game teaches you that nobody is safe and that death for any character waits just around the corner. Ellie goes through and finishes off everyone in her crew, and then, when it reaches critical mass, you are thrown into the perspective of the villain you've been hunting for up until this point the entire game. From here, the game tries to make you sympathize with Abby, which is admittedly very hard considering what we already know she does and what her motivations are. In my playthrough, I found I was less sympathizing with her and more seeing her reasoning. I don't forgive her for what she did, but I understand why she did it, which is the conclusion that Ellie has to come to as well. Abby lets Ellie live twice, once in the mansion at the beginning of the game, and again in the theater towards the middle. When we get to the fight on the beach, Ellie has Abby by the throat underwater. She could have very easily ended everything right there, but she has a realization that makes her stop. She sees images of Joel in her head. Memories come flooding back to her. She knows that killing her won't change anything. Abby being dead won't bring Joel back to life. Her suffering won't end with Abby. In that same split second, she realizes that if she kills Abby, she will be doing the same thing that was done to her, removing a mentor figure. If she kills Abby, Lev will have no one. She understands the importance of this. She is immediately convicted by what she has done and lets Abby go with Lev, thus ending the cycle of violence. For those unaware, the quote-unquote cycle of violence is one of the major themes of this game and plays out as follows. The Fireflies need to use Ellie for the vaccine, which will kill her. Joel kills the man responsible for her planned death, who we learn is Abby's father. Abby seeks revenge for her father's death and kills Joel. Ellie goes on a mission to kill Abby and kills her friends along the way, and so on. If Ellie had killed Abby on the beach, this cycle would continue. There would be no closing the circle. Letting Abby live proves that after everything, there is still a human side to Ellie. She isn't just a mindless killing machine hell-bent on revenge. She's a person with morality and a heart. Learning the theme of this game and the message it is trying to get across is a tricky thing. There are a lot of intersecting philosophical ideas that can be taken away from the game, some even opposing one another. It just depends on the perspective of the player which one they take away. This is where hearing from the devs and the actors themselves helps put things into perspective. We'll come back to that. A common comparison I've seen given to this game is Star Wars The Last Jedi. Both were heavily criticized for having so-called a bad understanding of the characters and poor writing, which is not the case for either. Both stories try to do the same thing, and that is address the gray morality that governs the real world. Often in fiction, there is a very definite good guy and a definite bad guy. Something that The Last Jedi and The Last of Us do to support that point is no one is fully good or fully bad. We see this almost personified by the casino on Canto Bight. The evidence on the stolen ship tells the characters that the rebellion buys weapons from the same supplier as the Empire.
Let's see who formerly owned this gorgeous hunk. This guy is an arms dealer. Made his bank selling weapons to the bad guys. Oh. I'm the good.
The reason it doesn't work in The Last Jedi is the world has established in the previous additions to the story that there is a bad guy and a good guy, a dark side and a light side of the Force. It is a traditional piece of media, and that's how they operate. The bad guy is defeated in the end. An argument could be made that the prequel trilogy also alludes to this point by the Jedi Council being corrupt and being selfish with the light side, but that is an entirely separate analysis video. Let me know if you would like me to cover that. To provide a quote from a totally separate fandom but works beautifully in the situation, Sirius Black famously tells Harry Potter that
the world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters.
This is seen extremely obviously all over the place in the Last of Us franchise, which is why it's a better example of this concept. The characters are more realistic. They are real people, not space warriors. They are human. They make mistakes. They act out of passion and love. They get angry and do things they may regret. That's life. Generally, fiction shows the consumer a world separate from real life, where everything is ideal and the good guys always win, but not here. This game shows what real life can be like, even if it is to a very extreme degree. Taking a break from the narrative, I would like to touch on the gameplay itself. This game is truly a masterclass in environmental storytelling. The first game pulled this off pretty spectacularly, but this game definitely outdoes itself. There are more notes and collectibles that you can throw a bottle at. If you played this game and you didn't get any of the notes, then you missed out on a pretty significant chunk of the game. To give an example, when playing as Ellie on Seattle Day 2, you acquire the bow and arrow after making your way through a neighborhood and taking it off of a body of an infected that has been trapped in a garage. However, if you seek out the notes in the preceding area, you will learn the tale of Boris Legasov. Before the outbreak, Boris was an award-winning archer and father to Sophia. Once the infection spread, he was praised in his surviving community as the greatest clicker killer out there. His skill with a bow and arrow made him a force to be reckoned with. After the WLF overthrew Fedra, his best friend Yuli tried to convince him to stand up against their order to relocate to the stadium with the rest of Seattle's surviving population, believing that Boris could convince the neighbors to resist the WLF. However, tragedy struck when Sophia, while making protest art, was caught and gunned down by a WLF patrol, breaking and enraging Boris, much to the horror of his friends. Many people decided to comply with the WLF's orders out of fear for their families. This angered Boris, who wanted to wage war against them, and led to him ambushing and killing an entire patrol, leaving the message, "Come get me, assholes," on the side of their Jeep. This caused his remaining neighbors, Yuli included, to conspire to turn Boris in to save themselves. However, Boris learned of this and, embittered by his friend's betrayal, drugged them unconscious and dragged them into a garage full of spores. A now infected Yuli woke up and after a brief struggle, bit Boris before being sealed in the garage. Boris wrote a final note to Yolanda apologizing to her for not being able to take care of Alfie, writing that he could already feel himself losing his mind, and said that he hoped his former friend's final lucid thoughts would be of him as they turned into runners. He then locked himself in a building and transformed into an infected, eventually becoming a stalker. It's cliche at this point to say that it's very beautiful to see nature reclaiming the landscape, but I can't go without mentioning it. The visuals and level design really immerse you into the story. Not to mention, Naughty Dog went out of their way to make a pretty faithful recreation of Seattle, aside from the subway system that isn't actually there. But this is in fact a work of fiction. The foliage plays a rather large role in the game, not only in telling the player that Mother Nature is repoing the cities, but it also provides a functional mechanic. In-game, the player is allowed to crouch in tall grass and overgrown vegetation to hide from enemies, as well as go prone in shorter grass to achieve the same effect. Another example of perfectly reasonable game design that could work in real life. A subtle reminder that the characters in this game are real people, not superhuman or powered in any way, just people, doing things people would do in order to survive. To that point, I'd like to bring forward another small detail that personifies the people in this game. When fighting human enemies like the Seraphites and the WLF, they call each other by name. They scream in anguish when you kill one of their friends, furthering the idea that everyone involved in the story has a life of their own. They will yell callouts to tell one another to flank or to rush you when you run out of ammo. This includes their animals. If you kill one of the dog's owners, they will be visibly sad. The term ludonarrative dissonance gets thrown around a lot when talking about the aspects of this game. For those that don't know, ludonarrative dissonance is the conflict between a video game's narrative told through the story and the narrative told through the gameplay. Ludonarrative, a compound of ludology and narrative, refers to the intersection in a video game of ludic elements and narrative elements. It's a common thing to bring up, but it's the perfect way to describe how this game handles the off-the-beaten-path elements to the story. The mechanics teach you that you need to scavenge for supplies, and along the way, the same becomes true for the notes and playing cards and survival manuals, etc. The environment itself is a character, and it is portrayed masterfully. Another subtle detail I would like to call your attention to is the symbolism of the moth. It is the symbol on Joel's guitar, which he gives to Ellie. It is on Ellie's tattoo covering her bite mark, and it is in the loading screens. The moth is a very fitting metaphor for the game. The moth follows light, and that represents the story perfectly for two reasons. Thematically, the characters throughout the story are seeking the light. They are striving to be better versions of themselves. Abby gives up trying to be the tough guy. She goes from killing for vengeance to killing to protect others, which admittedly is still killing, but baby steps. And as I said, Ellie lets Abby go, showing that she still has morality in her. The characters in the story without anyone having to be killed. Reason number 2, Abby and Owen are seeking the Fireflies. They were once Fireflies in the past and they want to go back. For a long time, they believed that the Fireflies had disbanded, but Owen finds out where a new group had risen up from the proverbial ashes, and Abby goes toward them. The slogan for the Fireflies is "Look for the light," and that's exactly what she does. Like a moth, she seeks out the light. Moving on to the combat, I think the combat system used in this game is the cleanest and smoothest method of fighting I've ever seen in a game. The seamless transitions from melee to gunplay allows the player to stay immersed in the moment. The addition of dodging provides new opportunities for combos when punching, or a quick weapon swap if needed. The rest of the combat is largely the same as in the first game, which is not a bad thing. It works very well and is easy to understand. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, and all Naughty Dog did here was improve upon what they had already done well. Adding in the fast weapon swap by pressing R1 and the dodge mechanic by pressing L1, alongside the beautiful animations, really makes the combat feel buttery smooth. The crafting and supplement system is another popular mechanic that was grandfathered in. Just like the combat, the only changes that were made were improvements. Now, we see different branches of upgrades you can give yourself. Certain upgrade paths for stealth, healing, crafting, and others are all separate and gradually reveal themselves as you progress through the game. One final thing I would like to talk about looks at the game as a whole, and that is, the two main playable characters in this game are essentially mirror images of one another. In the beginning, we see Ellie lose her father figure. Because of this great loss and her lust for revenge, she sets out on a path that will inevitably consume her. Even after she gives up the mission and tries to start a new life, she is haunted by what Abby did to her. She has to finish the job. On the other side, we see Abby. She was put in the same boat as Ellie. Her father was murdered, and she wanted revenge. As it happened much earlier on in life for Abby, she dedicated all of her time and effort into training, making herself more capable and useful in combat, getting together a group who had a similar mindset to her own, and tracking down Joel to exact her revenge. Then, we see her realize her goal. She kills Joel, and we get to see how she feels afterwards. She realizes that even after completing the task and accomplishing the thing she had been working years for, she doesn't feel any better. better. She realizes that in killing Joel, yes, she has gotten her revenge, but to her, this changes nothing. She never actually knew Joel, so her life is unchanged, only now she is without purpose, until she runs into Yara and Lev. They give her purpose. As I'm writing this script, I'm realizing how much Abby is a pretty fitting foil to Joel. They both have the same motivations. They were once a cold-blooded murderer living off of spite and anger. Then they cross paths with a young kid they have to protect, who they will grow to appreciate and take under their wing. And then, the daughter of the father they kill comes back for revenge and makes an attempt at their life. It makes sense. Abby is a mix of Joel and Ellie, a daughter on a desperate mission for revenge, and a mentor who grows fond of the youth they pick up along the way. I will admit, I've grown to appreciate the character of Abby since finishing the game. While playing, I wanted nothing more than to kill her as soon as I could. But now, as I look back and analyze her character, she fits into the story perfectly. Again, am I happy with the direction of the story? Not really. I wish Joel hadn't died. I wish we didn't spend so much time with Abby and her WLF crew. I wish Jesse would have stayed alive because I really liked his character. I wish a lot of things were different. As I mentioned, I think that's where fans are having trouble. They didn't get the game they wanted, so they throw hate at it. And to that, I will say this. You did not write this game. Unless, of course, Neil is watching this, in which case, hey, Mr. Druckmann, I love your work. I hope this video is doing your game justice. We are not the authors of these characters. We do not decide what happens to them. We only get to witness it. The same goes for any other piece of media. In a film, we as the audience have no control over what the characters do. In a book, we are just a reader and an observer. Games are allowed to be different though, as we get to interact with the characters in real time. But that is not the same as reaching into the narrative and laying out their futures. Troy Baker, the actor that portrays Joel himself, said it best when he said,
Part 1 shifted the conversation about games and media and even was reflective of our culture. So is Part 2. Everyone talks about how this feels like such a departure. Not everyone. That's hyperbole and inaccurate. There's a section and a subsect of this culture that says that this is a departure of this game. And it is absolutely not. It is 100% in line with this game, and the fact that it is revelatory and relevant to this culture and holds up a mirror, and the fact that there are people who say, I will never play it, and you can never change my mind about this game, is exactly where our culture is at. Because even when you show someone that they're wrong, right now, it is anathema to our society right now to go, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. Let me give this another shot. That is just not where our culture is at. And not unfortunately, The Last of Us holds up a mirror to that and says, are you willing to hate the thing you love? And not only will you love it, will you selflessly love it? Don't love this thing selfishly for what you want it to be, but can you love it for what it is? That is this game. I've never played a game in my life that requires so much of me. And it refuses to allow me to love this thing selfishly, and it demands that I love it selflessly. I've never experienced that before. Any game that I've been in or not been in, just played, this is something that is wholly unique.
the purpose of the game is to challenge your beliefs. It makes you think about what humanity means and how the decisions we make affect other people. It also provides an excellent reality check for players by telling them, hey, you are not the main character. Every other person on the planet is going through life just like you are, all of them with their own struggles and hardships and good times and successes. It's not all about you. This is definitely one of those games you need to play twice to grasp the whole experience. On your first run, there are a lot of details you miss as Ellie interacting with the WLF that will make much more sense after you've experienced Abby's section of the game. So I implore you to play this game for yourself and at least attempt a New Game Plus run. I did, and it made the first 3 days in Seattle so much fuller. You know what the WLF are doing just beyond those walls, the situations you walk into and disrupt. The story is laid out to reveal things to you when it feels like it's too late to fix them. Going through it again with the knowledge you gained helps make the world feel so much richer than just two girls taking on a town. You know the battles you are getting into. You understand the stakes better. Just like the first game, The Last of Us Part 2 fundamentally changed me as a person. I learned lessons that apply to real life, not just video games. And that's the goal of a truly compelling story. You come out the other side different than when you went in. You change for the better. You learn from the characters. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the first video like this I've done, so forgive me if it's not as high quality as other video essayists out there. I had all these thoughts that I wanted to share, and this would have been much too long for a Reddit thread or a Twitter post, so I decided to go all out. I actually really enjoyed this process, so I may do more of these in the future with other things that I'm passionate about. Who knows? Let me hear your thoughts in the comments. I want to have a healthy discussion about the game, not the blind, uninformed hate that is plaguing places like Twitter and the subreddit and other YouTube channels. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.